The thing you've been waiting for isn't running late. It's been standing just outside your line of sight, in a form you keep dismissing because it doesn't match the picture in your head. And Carl Jung spent a good part of his life trying to understand why human beings can spend decades waiting for something that has, in some quiet way, already arrived, and walked right past them because it wore the wrong face. You know the feeling, that low hum underneath your ordinary days, the sense that your real life hasn't started yet, that something is coming, the relationship, the breakthrough, the opportunity, the version of yourself that finally feels like home, and until it gets here, you're in a kind of waiting room, passing time, holding your breath, keeping one eye on the road, watching for the shape you've already decided it will take. Jung noticed this pattern in person after person who came to sit across from him. Successful people, struggling people, people who had everything, and people who had almost nothing. And underneath their particular problems, he kept finding the same posture, a life organized around anticipation, a whole psyche leaning forward toward a future arrival that never quite came, or came in a form so unexpected that they didn't recognize it as the thing they'd been aching for. Today I want to walk you through what Jung understood about this waiting, why it grips us so completely, why the thing we're waiting for so rarely appears the way we imagine, and what actually happens in the moment it finally shows up. Because if you're in that waiting room right now, feeling like your life is on pause until the next thing lands, there's a real chance you're standing closer to it than you've ever been. And the only reason you can't see it yet is that you're still watching the wrong direction. Let me start with what Jung recognized about the waiting itself, because most people misunderstand what they're actually doing when they wait. You think you're waiting for an event, a phone call, a meeting, a person to walk into your life, a moment when circumstances finally line up and the path becomes clear. But Jung would have pointed out that the event is almost never the real thing you're waiting for. The event is a screen. And onto that screen, you've projected something much deeper, a feeling you believe you'll finally be allowed to have once the event occurs. Think about what you're actually anticipating. It's not really the promotion. It's the feeling of being valued, of finally being seen as enough. It's not really the relationship. It's the feeling of no longer being alone inside yourself, of being met, of mattering to someone completely. It's not really the money or the move or the change in circumstances. It's the sense of safety, of arrival, of finally exhaling after years of holding tension in your chest. Jung called this the projection of an inner reality onto an outer object. The psyche takes something that lives inside you, a longing, a wholeness, a missing piece, and it casts that thing outward, attaching it to a future event. And then you wait for the event, believing that when it comes, it will hand you back the feeling you've been missing. But here's the trap he saw so clearly. The event can't deliver the feeling, because the feeling was never located in the event to begin with. It was always inside you, waiting to be recognized. This is why people so often reach the thing they've been waiting for and feel a strange, hollow letdown instead of the arrival they expected. The promotion comes and the emptiness stays. The relationship starts and the loneliness follows them into it. The move happens and they unpack the same restlessness in a new city. They got the screen. But the thing projected onto the screen was never on the screen at all. Jung watched this happen so many times that he started to see waiting itself as a kind of avoidance. As long as you're waiting for the thing to appear out there, you never have to do the harder work of finding it in here. The waiting feels like movement, like hope, like you're doing something. But often, it's a way of postponing the encounter with yourself that the whole longing was pointing toward the entire time. And this is where his observation gets uncomfortable, so stay with me. Because the reason the thing you're waiting for hasn't appeared might not be that it's absent. It might be that you've been staring so hard down one particular road, so fixed on one particular shape, that you've made yourself blind to every other direction it could arrive from. Picture someone standing at a window, watching a road. They've been told, or they've told themselves, that what they're waiting for will come up that road, from the east, in a specific vehicle at a specific pace. So they watch the road. Days pass, months, years. Their whole attention narrows to that one strip of pavement. And the thing they're waiting for, meanwhile, is walking up the path behind the house, knocking on the back door, standing in the garden. But they never turn around, because they've decided, with total conviction, which direction the future comes from. That's the human condition Jung kept running into. We don't just wait. We wait with a script. We've already decided what the answer looks like, sounds like, when it arrives, and how. And that script, which feels like clarity, like knowing what we want, is actually the thing keeping the answer out. Because the psyche, the deeper intelligence Jung spent his life studying, almost never delivers what you asked for in the form you asked for it. It delivers something truer than what you asked for, and truer things rarely match the pictures we draw in advance. Jung had a term for the deeper center of the personality, the part of you that's larger than your conscious plans and preferences. He called it the self. Not the ego. The ego is the small, managing part of you that makes the lists and holds the pictures and decides which road to watch. The self is something bigger. It's the totality of who you are, including everything you haven't met yet, everything buried in the unconscious, everything you were before the world taught you who to be. And here's what he understood that changes everything about this waiting. What you've truly been waiting for, underneath all the specific events and outcomes, is contact with the self. It's the feeling of being whole, of being at home in your own life, of no longer being split between the person you perform and the person you actually are. Every specific thing you wait for is a costume that this deeper longing wears. And the reason none of the costumes ever fully satisfy is that the real guest was never the costume. So when we say the thing you've been waiting for is about to appear, Jung would have taken that seriously, but not the way you might expect. He wouldn't have promised you the event on the road. He'd have told you that what's about to appear is you, the realer you, the one that's been trying to emerge for years, held back by the ego's insistence that the real answer must come from out there, in the shape you already decided on. But that emergence, that appearance, follows its own laws. And the first law is that it comes only when you loosen your grip on the script. Let me explain what that loosening actually looks like, because it's rarely comfortable, and it almost never feels like progress while it's happening. When someone finally stops watching the one road, when the fixed picture of what they're waiting for starts to crack, the first thing they feel isn't relief. It's disorientation, because that picture, however much it was blocking them, was also organizing their whole life. It told them what to hope for, what to work toward, what to measure their days against. Take it away and there's a period where you don't know what you're waiting for anymore, and that not knowing feels like loss, even though it's actually the ground clearing. Jung saw this as one of the most delicate moments in a person's development. The old expectation has died, and the new reality hasn't shown its face yet. You're in the gap. And in that gap, the temptation is enormous to grab the old script back, to return to watching the familiar road, because at least the familiar longing had a shape. The formless open space of not knowing feels unbearable to the ego, which survives on certainty and plans. But if you can stand in that open space, if you can tolerate not knowing which direction it comes from, something remarkable starts to happen. Your peripheral vision returns. You start noticing things you'd been filtering out for years because they didn't match the picture. A small opportunity you'd dismissed as too modest. A person you'd overlooked because they didn't fit the type you were waiting for. An inner pull towards something that makes no sense on paper but won't leave you alone. These are the backdoor arrivals. The things that were always coming, from directions you refused to watch. Jung had a word for the strange way meaningful things start clustering once you stop forcing the outcome. He called it synchronicity. Those moments when the inner and outer world seem to rhyme, when a coincidence carries a weight of meaning that mere chance can't explain. He believed these weren't magic. He believed they were what you notice when the psyche and the world briefly align, when you've stopped straining toward one fixed future long enough to see the pattern that was always there. And these synchronicities tend to arrive right after the letting go, not before, not during the desperate watching, but in that quiet period after the grip loosens, when you finally admitted you don't know what's coming or from where. It's as if the deeper intelligence can only get through to you once you've stopped shouting your demands at it. Once the ego stops insisting the answer look a certain way, the self finally has room to speak. If you're somewhere in this right now, if the thing you were so sure about has started to feel less certain, if you're standing in that disorienting open space where the old picture has cracked, but nothing new has arrived yet, I want to point you towards something we made for exactly this stretch of the road. It's a guide called True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises built from Jung's approach to meeting the parts of yourself you've been waiting to become. It's designed for people standing in the gap, learning to turn away from the one road they've been watching and see what's actually approaching. You'll find it linked right below. But stay with me here, because the most important part of what Jung understood is still ahead. The part about what it actually looks like when the thing you've been waiting for finally shows its face. Here's what almost nobody prepares you for. When it appears, it usually appears small. We imagine arrival as a thunderclap, the dramatic moment, the scene where everything changes at once and you know beyond doubt that this is it. But Jung noticed that genuine turning points in a person's life almost never announce themselves that way. They come quietly, disguised as an ordinary Tuesday, wearing the clothes of something so modest you could easily overlook it. The most significant shift of your entire life might arrive as a passing thought, a small decision, a conversation you almost didn't have, a door you almost didn't open because it looked too plain to matter. This is because the self doesn't work through spectacle. It works through what Jung called the transcendent function, a kind of bridge that forms between your conscious mind and the vast unconscious material underneath it. When those two levels of you finally start communicating, when the tension between who you've been and who you're becoming reaches a certain point, something new is produced. A new attitude, a new possibility, a third thing that neither the old you nor the buried you could have made alone. And this new thing rarely arrives with fanfare. It arrives as a subtle shift in how you see, a small loosening, a quiet certainty that wasn't there yesterday. So the person waiting for the thunderclap misses it entirely. They're watching the road for the grand arrival, while the actual transformation is happening in the smallest gestures of their ordinary life. The moment they finally said no to something they'd always said yes to. The morning they woke up and simply didn't want the thing they'd wanted for a decade. The afternoon a stranger said one sentence that reorganized how they understood their whole history. These are the appearances, and they look like nothing until you look back later and realize they were everything. Jung also noticed something that unsettled a lot of people, and it's worth sitting with. What you've been waiting for often arrives disguised as its opposite. He borrowed a term from the old Greek thinkers for this, enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite once they reach an extreme. The longest darkness tips into first light. The deepest stuckness breaks into sudden motion. And the thing you've been longing for frequently comes wrapped in the very experience you were most afraid of. The love you were waiting for might arrive only after a loss you thought would break you. The freedom you craved might come dressed as a door closing rather than a door opening. The purpose you've been searching for might reveal itself in the middle of what feels like complete failure. This is why so many people, in the exact moment their prayer is being answered, believe instead that everything is falling apart. They're looking for the arrival to feel like fulfillment, and it feels like collapse. So they brace against it. They fight the very thing they asked for, because it came in through the door of their fear instead of the door of their hope. Think about someone who spent years waiting to finally feel free. Free of an identity that never fit, a role they'd outgrown, a way of living that quietly suffocated them. And then the thing they built their security on starts to crumble. The job, the relationship, the structure. And they panic. They read it as disaster. But the freedom they'd been waiting for their whole life could only reach them once that structure came down. The collapse wasn't the opposite of the answer. The collapse was the answer, walking up the back path, knocking on the door they'd nailed shut out of fear. Jung saw this pattern so often that he came to trust it almost more than any other. The people who arrived at his door in what looked like the worst period of their lives were frequently standing at the threshold of their most important becoming, and the ones who could recognize the disguised arrival, who could feel past the fear to the possibility hidden inside it, those were the ones who crossed through into a genuinely new chapter. The ones who couldn't ran back to the old road and kept waiting for an arrival that had already come and gone. Now let me take this one layer deeper, because there's a turn here that most people miss entirely, and it's the whole point. We've been talking as if the thing you're waiting for is a something, an event, a feeling, an emergence of the self, an arrival that finally lands. But Jung's most radical insight was that the waiting, in the end, isn't answered by a thing appearing to you at all. It's answered by you becoming the kind of person the thing was always meant for. Consider it this way. Imagine the thing you've been waiting for has been trying to reach you for years, but it can only be received by a version of you that doesn't exist yet. The relationship you long for requires a you who can actually be present, who isn't still performing, still guarding, still projecting old wounds onto every new face. The opportunity you're waiting for requires a you who's ready to say yes without flinching, who trusts their own judgment, who won't sabotage the thing the moment it arrives. The peace you crave requires a you who has stopped abandoning yourself to earn everyone else's approval. So the delay you've been experiencing, the sense that the thing keeps not coming, often isn't the thing being withheld. It's the space in which you're being made ready to receive it. The years of waiting weren't empty. They were doing something to you, whether you noticed or not. Grinding down the parts of you that couldn't hold what you wanted, softening the grip, teaching you, through repeated disappointment, that the scripts don't work, that the road you keep watching stays empty for a reason. Jung called the whole of this process individuation, the slow, lifelong movement toward becoming who you actually are, rather than who you were shaped to be. And individuation is exactly what turns a person into someone capable of receiving their own longing. The thing you've been waiting for and the person you're becoming are converging, and they meet at a single point. When you've become who you're meant to be, the thing you've been waiting for is already there, because it was you the whole time. Your own realness, finally arriving in your own life. This is why he could say, without any sentimentality, that what you've been waiting for is about to appear. Because if you've been in the long dark of waiting, if you've been through the disappointments, the collapse of the old scripts, the disorientation of the open space, then the readiness he's talking about is being built in you right now, whether or not you can feel it. The very difficulty of the wait is the evidence that something in you is being prepared to hold something large. Let me say something about the fear that comes right before the appearance, because Jung understood this too, and it catches almost everyone off guard. Right before the thing appears, there's often a surge of resistance, a last, fierce pull back toward the familiar. The ego, sensing that it's about to lose its central position, that the deeper self is about to break through and reorganize everything, tends to panic. And that panic can feel like doubt, like despair, like a sudden conviction that nothing will ever change and you've been fooling yourself the whole time. Many people, in the final stretch before the breakthrough, feel the most hopeless they've felt in the entire journey. Jung would have told you not to read that hopelessness as a verdict. Read it as a signal. The intensity of the resistance is usually proportional to the significance of what's trying to emerge. The old structure fights hardest right before it dissolves, the way the night is darkest in the hour before the first light touches the horizon. If you're feeling that particular despair, the kind that says, "Give up, it was never coming, go back to how things were," there's a real chance you're standing much closer to the appearance than you think. The despair isn't the truth. It's the last defense of the part of you that's afraid to be reorganized by something larger. And this is where the whole thing turns on a single capacity, one that Jung considered central to any real transformation: the capacity to stay. To not run back to the familiar road when the open space gets frightening. To not grab the old script back when the not knowing becomes unbearable. To hold the tension between the old life dying and the new one not yet born. And to keep standing there, turned toward the back door, watching a direction you were never taught to watch. It sounds passive, this staying. It isn't. It's one of the most active things a human being can do, to remain present in the discomfort of transformation without forcing a premature resolution. Everything in you will want to resolve the tension by either going back or leaping forward into some new certainty, and the whole art is to do neither. To let the appearance come on its own terms, at its own pace, in its own unexpected shape. To trust that the deeper intelligence knows the timing better than the ego does. If you can do that, if you can stay in the threshold and keep your eyes open to the directions you don't expect, then what appears will be truer than anything you could have scripted. It won't match your picture. It'll be better than your picture, because your picture was drawn by the small, frightened part of you, and what's arriving comes from the whole of you. I want to speak directly to you now, if you're the person this is actually for. If your life has felt like a waiting room lately, if you've had that hum underneath your days, that sense that the real thing hasn't started yet, that you're holding your breath for an arrival that keeps not coming. If you've been watching one road so long that your neck aches from the strain of it, Jung would want you to know that the ache is not evidence that nothing is happening. The ache is the shape of something large trying to be born through you. You're not behind. You're not being punished. You're not the one person for whom it never comes. You're in the gap. And the gap, however empty it feels, is the exact place where the thing you've been waiting for gets close enough to touch. The emptiness you feel isn't the absence of what you want. It's the space being cleared so that what you want has somewhere to land. The only thing being asked of you is a small turn, a turning away from the fixed picture of how it has to look, a willingness to consider that it might come from behind you, from the side, disguised, small, wearing the face of something you didn't order, a softening of the grip that's been keeping the answer out, while feeling the whole time like the thing that would bring it in. And underneath even that, the deepest turn of all, a willingness to consider that the arrival you've been waiting for isn't a stranger coming up the road at all. It's you, coming home to yourself, the realist version of you, the one that's been trying to emerge underneath all the performing and the waiting and the watching, Finally stepping into your own life and looking around and thinking, "Oh, there you are. I've been trying to reach you for years." Jung staked his entire understanding of the psyche on the belief that this arrival is available to every person willing to stop scripting it. Not guaranteed to be easy, not guaranteed to look like the picture, but available, real, closer than the waiting makes it seem. He watched it happen in people who'd given up hope, people who were certain they'd missed their chance, people standing in what they thought was the ruins of their lives. And what he saw again and again was that the ruins were the ground being cleared, and the giving up was the ego finally loosening its grip, and the thing they'd waited for their whole lives walked in the moment they stopped demanding it come the way they'd imagined. So watch the back door. Watch the ordinary Tuesday. Watch the small decision, the plain-looking opportunity, the person who doesn't match the type, the collapse that might be a door. Watch the direction you were never taught to watch, because that's where it comes from. That's where it's always come from. The thing you've been waiting for isn't late. It's been walking toward you this whole time, from a direction you had your back turned to. And the day you finally turn around, the day you stop watching the one empty road and let yourself see the whole horizon, you'll understand that it was never a matter of the arrival being delayed. It was a matter of you becoming ready to see it. That readiness is being built in you right now. And the appearing, when it comes, will feel less like a stranger knocking and more like a recognition. Like something you already knew, finally allowed to become real. Stay in the threshold. Keep your eyes open to the unexpected, and trust that what's forming in the dark of your waiting is not the end of your story, but the beginning of the truest chapter you've lived. Something is about to appear. It just won't look like what you drew, and that's exactly why it will finally be enough. If you haven't yet, take a look at our guide, True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, made for people standing right where you might be standing now, in the gap between the old road and the new one. It's built to help you turn around, to see what's actually approaching, and to become the person the thing you've been waiting for was always meant for. The link is right below this video.